Welcome to the Filmcast's review of I Saw the TV Glow. Joining us for this review, she is the lead evening news editor at slashfilm.com. She also co-hosts the coming of age film podcast, This Ends at Prom. BJ Colangelo, welcome back to the Filmcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
Hello.
It's so great to have you back, BJ. Talk about this movie. You watched this at the Overlook Film Festival, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I sure did, and It was a hard screening to get into. It was one of the hot titles at the fest where people were lining up an hour beforehand to make sure they could see it.
I will say I watched this movie. I missed this at Sundance, so I watched it at the Seattle International Film Festival. And it was entirely sold out. There was a line around the block to get into the movie.
Yep.
From people who already had tickets.
So I saw it from the Atlanta Film Festival. Same deal.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, people want to see this movie.
Last night.
How crowded was your theater, Jeff?
8:45 p.m. screening in suburban Denver.
What was the festival,
And it was
Jeff?
full of young people.
What was the
really?
festival?
Full
That's
of young
great.
people.
That's
That's
awesome.
great.
I
Awesome.
was thinking you might be going to like an empty theater for a small indie film like this.
I assumed I would be too, but it was
Wow.
not.
Great.
It was tons.
Great.
All the teens were coming out.
That's wonderful.
For
Did
it.
they or did they not have their phones out? That's the thing I care about.
Yeah.
Well, I was sitting. They were sitting behind me, so I didn't.
Okay.
But they were quiet. They weren't talking.
I love it.
I'll tell you what, BJ. It did not make me happy as I was waiting outside while the trailers were playing to watch all the teens going. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to shush some people. I'm gonna have to shush some teens. But I didn't. I didn't have to shush a single teen.
Wow.
Wow.
Versus
great.
teens. You've made it,
Yeah.
Jeff. Yeah.
Well, according to the plot summary of this movie from the internet, I Saw the TV Glow is about what happens when a classmate introduces teenage Owen to a mysterious late-night TV show, a vision of a supernatural world beneath their own. In the pale glow of the television, Owen's view of reality begins to crack. BJ Colangelo, what did you think overall of this movie, I Saw the TV Glow?
Ooh, this movie works for me on like 5 different levels. The main one being is that this definitely speaks to my coming of age upbringing. This is definitely a show for people who watched shows like Buffy and Pete and Pete, for sure. So
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yeah, for me, very heavily, it was a show that no one ever talks about, which is so weird, which was the Disney Channel's version of like spooky teen stuff. So that works for me on this level. It's also very dreamy and very cerebral, which is very much Jane Schoenbrun's thing. Like they are very interested in the metaphor of why we are the way we are rather than presenting it directly, which I'm very, very into. And this is such an unapologetically queer movie about that egg crack moment, and we don't tell those stories very often. It's usually a very heavy-handed coming out story, and this is not that. And I was just very dazzled by it, especially because I might catch heat for this. I was not as into We're All Going to the World's Fair as I think a lot of my comrades were, and so I was very hesitant going into I Saw the TV Glow, and I was like, oh nope, I'm on board now. I see what they're doing. I see the vision. I understand the kind of films that Jane's trying to make, and I'm on board.
Devindra, I think you were a fan of We're All Going to the World's Fair. Am I remembering that correctly?
I like that one too.
Yeah.
It is a very similar concept. That's somebody losing themselves in like an online game, right? So that's more internet of the 90s stuff, but very similar idea of disaffected teens kind of losing themselves in their media. Something I could relate to, I'd say.
Yeah, so Devindra, what'd you think of I Saw the TV Glow?
I saw this movie surrounded by a full audience of people who were often openly weeping at this movie. This movie devastated me. I can't relate to the queer side of things at all, but it is, I think it's like a very beautiful story of that, awareness. But for me, it is, I think the thing a lot of people can relate to in this, there is that moment, and maybe it was just like the 90s, but guys, I did not like high school very much. Did not like where I was. Did not like what was going on around me. So I attached myself to TV shows, and that was Buffy. That was a bit of Charmed. That was all these other shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was like from when I was younger. But that's when I really got into anime and stuff. And this movie is about that sense of like, your world sucks, like your sense of identity sucks. You don't know who you are, but you find something in this show which can help you, and you find connection to other people through this show. And that was me in the 90s, right? Like I had some friends at school, but I spent most of my time online. As soon as I discovered the internet, I was like, they're online talking about anime, talking about all these shows. Even throughout college too, like a lot of the core friends I made, which I don't think you ever hung out with, Dave, but they were the geeks who were like really into Buffy. Like we ran a frickin' sci-fi convention. Like we brought a convention to our small little college. We love these shows. And there's good and bad to that, right? And I think this movie kind of shows that of like, yeah, you can give yourself fully to a thing, but also you may lose a bit of yourself in it. And also, I don't know. It also there's like work on yourself that you may have to deal with to like fully fit into your own skin and find your way in the world. I just found there's a lot that was genuinely moving about this movie, and I've never seen something that really captured that. Right, the idea of just being like, well, these TV shows are great. You know, these like the Buffy stuff was like, there was kind of nothing like it at the time. Something that spoke to young people, that had cool music, cool young characters, was like really well written. Joss Whedon, you know, controversy acknowledged, everything. But at the time, that was my world. So to see a movie kind of acknowledge this and how easy it is also to feel isolated as a teenager and how hard it can be at times, I've just related a lot to that. And almost every aspect of this movie worked for me, especially Justice Smith, who plays the lead character Owen just like a little bird, right? Like he's barely his voice never really goes up. He's almost always shivering, like almost always in himself. And it's a kind of a brave performance because it's not super showy until it has to be, but he really does encapsulate that sort of vulnerability I think a lot of teenagers feel, especially if you don't feel like you fit within the world where you are right now. And I think this movie just speaks to a lot of that. The soundtrack kicks ass. I kind of love a lot of the imagery. Like some of the images from this movie I have in my head and then will be in my head for a very long time. Yeah, it's kind of long. It's kind of like loopy. It's not always clearly focused, but also I think that's like part of the appeal. You know, I wouldn't tell David Lynch to please focus up a little bit. You know, it's like, and I'm getting that same vibe here. It's like you're in the mood, the vibe of this movie, and the vibe of being in like desolate suburban type areas checked off. I get that. The vibe of like carrying around and trading VHS tapes because that culture mattered more than like the culture happening outside of you. Like, yeah, I'm totally all aboard this movie. I found it beautiful and devastating. It's a little messy, but yeah, I think just like life, that makes sense.
I gotta say, this is probably one of my favorite Justice Smith performances.
It's a tremendous.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
both him and Bridget Lundy Payne,
Mhm.
who plays Maddie
Maddie.
in the movie, I think they both do a great job of capturing what people who are like that are like, of which we, probably the four of us have been various stages of at one point in our lives, what those people are like and what it's like to be obsessed with the show. I do think the show, The Pink Opaque, is probably most directly referencing Buffy. The creator's name is Josh Pemberton, I believe, which I think is like a close analog of Joss Whedon.
Yes,
But,
most definitely. They
but
use
yes,
the Buffy font. Like
Yeah.
it's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff
They
cannot-
have a scene in a club with music in the background while they're talking to each other. Such Buffy vibes.
I honestly got also Twin Peaks: The Return vibes
True.
from some of
Definitely.
that
Yeah.
stuff. If you've seen the new David Lynch like sequel to Twin Peaks. Anyway, Jeff Kanata, I am so curious what you thought of this movie.
Jeff versus the teens. Let's go.
So I do want to acknowledge that we are recording this episode early because it's actually my birthday on Monday, the day when we usually record the podcast.
Happy birthday.
So
Happy birthday,
we had
Dave.
Jeff. Thank you. We had Jeff. Jeff had to travel quite a distance to see this movie last night in time for our review today.
Embed myself with the teens.
And I want to say
Something I'm loath to do.
Yes.
Even though this is a movie more for the generation, you're
Right.
still part of the Buffy generation, Jeff. You
Right.
know,
100%.
yeah.
But I want to acknowledge and say, Jeff, thanks for
Thank
watching
you.
this movie,
Thank you, Jeff.
which I have no idea whether you would enjoy or not. So, Jeff,
Certainly, this is one of those
I like
things
how you
like,
guys
oh,
set
this
this
is a
up.
me movie. This is I'm going to be alone on this podcast unless BJ is here. So thank you,
Yeah.
BJ.
You're
what did
very
you
welcome.
think?
Yeah.
What did you think of I Saw the TV Glow?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought of I Saw the TV Glow is best summed up in the form of a limerick. I saw the TV glow. What happened? I don't really know. It's not without merit, but I couldn't bear it because every scene's glacially slow. I will be mostly quiet this episode, and I recognize and I admire the emotion and connection that has been expressed by both BJ and Devindra. 20 minutes into this movie, I thought I was going to feel that way because I very much was a nerd in the way that Devindra is describing, when nerd actually meant something, right? When it wasn't this.
The 80s and 90s were hard.
When it wasn't a brand.
Well,
right?
yeah, it wasn't a good thing. It was a thing that made you get beat up in school.
Exactly. Yeah. And I also retreated inside of fiction and inside of media, and I felt all those feelings of isolation and discomfort and friendlessness and awkwardness. And this movie expresses that really well. I think it's directed beautifully. There are some really wonderful imagery in it.
Yeah.
That said, there's that old joke that there's really only one direction to give to actors, and that's faster. And I wish that direction had been given a bit more frequently for me. Obviously, you guys were vibing with this movie and loving the vibe. I found the pace to be really hard to endure because there's no variety in it. Every line that's spoken is spoken like this all the time throughout the movie. And that at a certain point, I was like, I got to tap out. This is like, it's too much. And I felt like the third act, as Devindra kind of pointed out, is a bit messy and kind of unfocused for me. I just found it to be a little bit too much of a meditation, too much of a vibe, and not enough of a payoff for me. I just wish the pace had. It's okay to luxuriate in that, to be in this kind of morose, sad, plodding thing, but not through the entire movie. I just need some respite from that, some variety, some contrast. And I thought visually the movie sparkles and shines. There's some really awesome imagery, like just the little tattoo that is kind of the hallmark of the show within the show here is such a cool idea. There's a lot of really cool ideas in it. But I thought the end for me was a disaster, and I thought that the pace just made me kind of it put me off at a certain point. I just lost interest.
Yeah. I'll share a few thoughts, and then I'd love to get the spoilers because I'm really curious to discuss with you folks the ending of the film.
There's so much I want to say that I can't because it's a spoiler.
Yeah. So let's just wait for just one more minute, and I'll just say I think I'm kind of in between Jeff and Devindra and BJ on this one. The pace did not bother me, but I think the movie really works in a huge variety of ways. I love the performances. I love the visuals. I love the central core idea behind the movie. I think the thing that didn't really work for me is I don't know that the movie functions that much beyond the level of metaphor, right? That this movie is a metaphor for something we can get more into in spoilers. And I think it's a beautifully done metaphor, but I don't know that is enough to sustain a 100. I don't know how long this was, like 100 minutes, right? Like 1 hour, 40-minute movie. Yeah. And it does a great job of like capturing this milieu. It does a great job of capturing like the mindset of what it's like to be, in this zone where you're like obsessed with something to the exclusion of everything else, and what how all encompassing that becomes. I love that. It does a great job of capturing that, and I think it does a good job of like making that into a really effective metaphor. But I don't know that it functions beyond those things I just said, in telling like a compelling story beyond just those things. And even the director was at the screening I was at, and described it very much as a metaphor, described it very much as kind of the beginning stages of a journey, right? That this character is going on. And so if that is the objective, I think it has been accomplished really, really well. But I don't know that it delivers a lot of more than that is kind of what I generally expect from a movie that I watch, from a storytelling perspective. So I would say I think it's worth watching. Go check it out. If there's nothing else like it, but it didn't quite wasn't quite a home run for me, is what I would say. So I liked it overall, though. So anyway, those are my thoughts. We have much more to discuss. So anyway, those are our overall thoughts on the film. Let's get to spoilers starting right now. All right, let's talk about spoilers for I Saw the TV Glow. So this movie is a metaphor for the trans experience, right? Is what I understand, and I think the way the director described it, I thought was very poignant during the Q&A. That there's something about the character, Justice Smith's character, has seen something. By the end of the film, he has seen something that he cannot unsee, right? And I really enjoy the components of the movie where it's like he's starting to not understand what is actually real life versus what was actually the show, and are we real life right now and the show is a show, or are we in the show and this reality we're living in now is real life, or the fiction, right? The way the movie plays with reality I thought was really effective, and then the movie kind of ends abruptly. And I have to say, I've been to a lot of screenings at the Seattle Film Festival, and usually people erupt into applause right after the credits start. And this movie, that did not happen. Not because people didn't like the movie, but just because it was really struck people. It just ends seemingly mid-scene.
I didn't feel that. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I thought it was very enigmatic ending, very effective.
It's an enigmatic ending,
very effective. I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah,
but it's just people sat there for a full 1 to 2 minutes.
That's what happens when you're devastated. I don't know. In my crowd, I feel like people are just like, holy shit.
This is not a critique. This is not a critique.
That's how I'm saying
it as
yeah. I looked around at the seatmates, the people next to me. We just looked at each other. We're like, wow. And we just sat there through the credits. So
it definitely,
that was a silence for me. Yeah,
it definitely feels I think the cinder block is just finally pressed on your chest that has been hovering above you the entire movie, and that's when that scene happens. It's just nope, now it's on you, and now you have to hold this, because there was definitely a person in visibly queer, visibly trans person in my screening at Overlook who was crying so hard they were dry heaving. And that was when I kind of sat there and I went, okay, everyone is feeling this. We are feeling a communal experience of all knowing what this feels like and not wanting to deal with that feeling, and we're all dealing with it in our own ways right now.
Yeah. One of the other things the director said that I thought was really interesting was one of the inspirations for this movie was a lot of us got obsessed with these TV shows when we were growing up.
Buffy is their favorite show.
And many of the TV shows we were obsessed with ended horribly. Right? Remember Quantum Leap?
It was
remember
a different time.
I don't remember Quantum Leap.
There's a show called Quantum Leap, and it ended, and it was ending of Quantum Leap spoiled for this before, but Samuel Beckett never made it home, and then they misspelled his name in the title card, and it's
there was no care given at that time.
Yeah, there was no care given, and Jane Schoenbrun was saying how there was this kind of psychic damage that was done where you are so wrapped up in these characters and their fates, and then the show just ends horribly, and you feel like your life is incomplete in some way. And they wanted to explore that idea, and then realized that it could be a metaphor for the trans experience. Right.
One of the things that people don't perhaps recall that this movie really touches on is this notion of you just didn't know what episode you were going to get week to week.
Without the TV guide, at least.
You might get the next one in the story, or you might get one from a while before that.
You had to use episode guides to actually help you through the story.
Exactly. So the idea that there would be this ending to the tale that would come at the end of this linear progression through the tale is all too recent. You would just be like, well, that's it. That's the end of the show. So I think
the end of that chapter.
Yeah,
a wonderful thick trope to play with. I think. That's cool.
Like my version of this, which was so weird. The lead actress was replaced in the 3rd season because Disney thought that we should have a more conventionally attractive blonde protagonist, and it backfired horribly because people were like so fixated on this character, and like that is the thing that was like coursing through, is all of that feeling of betrayal that I had.
Right.
Because I think especially when you're a teenager or younger, and we're seeing it, I think, very much now with people older than that because of consuming media and only having media during quarantine of the pandemic, is that the things that you love become an extension of your own identity. So when they end, you end. When people tell you that show sucks, they're telling you you suck. And even though that's not true, that's the internalized feeling that you have. And this movie nails that sensation.
Right. And the director is saying how like when a show ends horribly, it's like you can't move on from it. Like there's a sense of like incompleteness of like we never got the actual ending. Honestly, I think on a mass scale, that's true of Game of Thrones. To be honest,
yeah,
like,
that ending sucks.
That there's people, there's a lot of people for whom like that felt like it wasn't the actual ending for that show. I think this movie does a good job of getting at that like feeling of being unsettled by it, right?
But it's also like, I mean, the clear metaphor for the trans experience there. I found I was so moved by the final scenes of Justice Smith because it's so sad. It's just so like we see his life and we see him slowly dying, and his face is cracked, his lips are cracked. He looks like a walking corpse. He has a family. He loves them. No emotion of saying he loves them, but he loves them, right? As much as he can, because he can't be his true self. And then you have the moment in the frickin' activity center. Guys, I did not grow up going to activity centers, but right now I am going to a lot of activity centers. So, because that is apparently the thing in the suburbs, and this did not exist in Connecticut, or at least where I was. But you go to activity centers, the kids have fun. You spend way too much money so that they can basically, run around and jump around. But to set him there, just in this like hellhole of a place where manufactured fun is supposed to be happening, and he is crying and having a breakdown and screaming his life out, and nobody responds. Like, that is horror movie material. That is like pure Lynchian vibes of the world, like psychically being against you almost. Like, maybe that's why I didn't feel like it was so abrupt that it ended, because I was like, no, this is the ending, and this is the saddest possible ending I can think of for this character, because he saw the road. Maddie came back and was like, hey, come with me, this is real, and he didn't take it. And that is the sort of thing of like
it's such a tragedy.
So sad.
Because the thing too is that we see throughout that he knows what is inside him. Like, he even says like, I don't want to cut myself open and look inside, because he knows what's there. And it's because he sees himself and Isabel in the pink opaque, and realizing that this is who he's connecting to, and what that realization means for him is so scary. And the unfortunate reality is that, so in like trans spaces, it's referred to as like the egg crack, of that you are always this person, but you are inside that egg. And are you going to crack the shell and be born, or are you going to stay in the shell? And once that egg cracks, you can't uncrack it. You will start oozing out of the crack. And so this entire movie is like watching somebody trying to hold all of the pieces of that egg and not let themselves ooze out of it. And then he oozes out of it. And it is as painful and heartbreaking as you can imagine it being, because you realized, what was this for? Like, you spent so long trying to hide this, and now you are in this fun center, which is essentially childhood distilled. You've refused to even grow up in a way that the rest of us have, because to do so would be to deny the truth that he knows is in there. And it just bodied me, like, watching him scream like that, because I know too many people who have done this, who have known the truth, who have refused to acknowledge it, because to acknowledge it is terrifying, and it ends horribly for them. And it's because we live in a world where like you can't. It is dangerous. It is scary. It is awful to make that realization. Not only is it terrifying to have the realization for yourself, but to know how literally every aspect of your life will change. The second you open yourself up and see what's in there, you can't unsee it. And he can't unsee it, and he's wasted his time. He's
wasted his entire life.
He made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
And oh God.
I described this to my wife when I got home as what if the Matrix, but Neo took the blue pill?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he had the inkling still.
You still can't not have been told, but you decided to stay in the Matrix and you just live the rest of your life knowing that that's not really the reality that is happening, but you're in the Matrix.
Also a trans film. So perfect comparison.
BJ, I'm curious if you had any thoughts on like the very final shot of the movie, right? The very final shot is Justice Smith has had his experience in the bathroom and pulling open his chest and everything like that. Really cool effect, by the way, because there's this close-up shot of his chest where he pulls it open, and I'm like, oh, well, they just used like a fake chest. And then the camera tilts up and you see it's like attached to it. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Pretty cool movie. And then he's just walking through this crowd and he said, oh, sorry about that. And like no one acknowledges him.
Apologizing for his own breakdown.
No one even seems to understand that no one like looks at him. No one
sees him.
Like,
Nobody sees him.
No one sees him.
Yeah.
So what'd you make of that final shot? Like, and why the movie decided to end on that moment?
I love that that's how it ends because I am a firm believer that the most poignant thing that has ever been uttered in cinema is in the movie Mortal Kombat, where M. Bison
when they scream Mortal Kombat,
yes,
where M. Bison is
Street
given
Fighter.
This. Street Fighter. Yes, this like it's very early. I am very tired.
Yes, I hear you.
Street Fighter, where M. Bison has been told this heartbreaking monologue about the city destroyed, and his response was, when M. Bison came to town, it was the worst day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday.
And that is what this ending is. Just as Owen has had the most mind-altering, life-shattering, personality-destroying realization. But it doesn't matter because it's his issue. This is an internalized issue. The rest of the world does not fucking care. And that is the loneliest feeling you can ever have. I can't speak to this from as a trans person. I'm only a queer person, but my wife is a trans person, and we have a lot of conversations about this. And the thing we both talk about is how ungodly lonely it feels when you have that aha moment of, I can't go back. My whole world has shifted. Everything has changed. I don't know what to do. And none of that matters to anyone around you. And you can feel like you're a burden for even having these feelings because no one knows how to help you. No one knows how to talk to you. But more importantly, no one cares because it doesn't actually affect any of them. But you feel this need to apologize. Like, I apologized to my parents when I came out and they were like, you don't have to do that. But you feel like you do because you know how bad things are and how, oh my God, have I been lying to them? How do they feel about this? Like, there's so many internalized feelings. So watching him apologize, like that is also what, like, that's for me, that's the cement block, is the apology, because it is a feeling I think that anybody who has had to go through that knows what that feels like. And it is awful. And it happens constantly every day for the rest of your life when you meet new people or when you have conversations. And so I love that it ends that way, because something that I've also really enjoyed in, Jane's press run is they've talked a lot about how they wanted to honor the messiness of when you first have these realizations, because there's also this through line that both Maddie and Owen believe that they are speaking a language that they've tapped into something that no one else in the world has ever tapped into, and they are operating on a level that no one else understands, while simultaneously realizing they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. And that is the most like teenage possible experience.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that is also part of this, like when you come out for the first time, when you start early transitioning, a lot of people operate simultaneously as, I know everything. I'm a genius. I figured this all out because I finally unlocked this, cheat code. But also, in reality, you have no idea what you're doing. And like, so I think it's this, the ending for me works more than some of the earlier stuff does, because you have to be able to buy into Maddie's character is such like an overwrought teen, like supernatural show character, where that's why you have the deliberate pacing of every line, because everything Maddie says is the most important and poignant thing you've ever heard in your entire life. And like, that's what it is. It is that teenage embrace of like, this is the smartest thing I've ever heard, even though it's being dismissed as just kid stuff. And I think there's something to that you can compare to queerness and transness. The amount of people who say, it's a phase. You'll figure this out when you get older. You'll grow out of it. You don't. Sometimes you don't.
One of the most effective moments of the movie for me was when you see the pink opaque TV show after he's like years have
when
passed.
He's older.
When he's older
on a streaming service.
Because first of all, I'm watching the pink opaque sections and I'm like, these villains are freaking terrifying. Like
the cut to the ice cream head.
The ice cream head, the planet, the guy with the moon face.
Mr. Melancholy.
It's all super scary. And then they show you what the quote unquote actual show was like, and it's like so juvenile compared to, and it's I've definitely had that experience where when you're watching something as in high school, it's like, this is a masterpiece. You're like, this is never going to get better than this, and then you watch it when you're older and you're like, I was into that. You know
what happened here? I feel like going back to like the original X-Men, the animated series, as much as I love that, rewatching the old episode, cheesy, corny, I get it, but even that moment was like, when he saw that on a streaming service, of course, easily accessible at the touch of a button. He didn't have to trade tapes with his friend who he didn't actually speak with for years too. They were just trading tapes. I love the early building up of their relationship, because I kind of had some of those too when I was in school, of just like, people are like, you have an understanding of what you're into and nobody else around you can understand it. That streaming service scene was just like, well, was that what it actually was? Or is that how in his current state, where he cannot comprehend the majesty of what it was as he used to as a teen? Like, can he just not define, can he not really see it anymore?
Yeah, has the trick cereal changed shapes? Are they balls now because we're adults and tricks are for kids? Or have they always been this shape?
Have they always been this way? But I do love that it changes from being a Buffy show to literally like a Nickelodeon, like a straight up Nickelodeon show. And that is... that just feels very on point as well. I want to shout out Fred Durst, by the way, who shows up.
Casting.
What perfect casting. He has maybe one line, in his one line when they start to open up about the show, is like, isn't that a show for girls? And that is something I remember hearing a lot about, like certain things I watched. Like among the anime things was like Sailor Moon and stuff at the time. And I was into all those fandoms. And I get that response, and people, that's like the people who just don't get it. And it really hurts when the people who are close to you don't get it at all. You know, I really would have loved to see like at least one more scene with Fred Durst's character. Like, he saves him like from the at one point, but he never actually says anything. But then it's just the line that he died and I lived in the house I grew up in. I stayed there. Yeah.
Just having Fred Durst, like, Limp Bizkit breaks the Fred Durst be the representation of being locked in a house of 90s oppressive masculinity. Genius.
Perfection.
My understanding is he did this movie all for the Nookie. But no, I shouldn't have even said that.
Jeff.
Hey, BJ, I'm curious what your interpretation of that scene was, where he says there's a moment in the movie where the main character says, I have a family, I love them, but then you never see the family.
And he doesn't sound like he actually, it's more like, I have a family.
That was odd to me. I was like, what? And we never got a follow up on that. And I was curious, you know, what did you make of that, BJ?
For me, my interpretation is that in life, we are conditioned to believe that you grow up, you go to college, you get a job, you start a family, you love your family, and that is what you do. Do I think that to some extent there is love there for his family, but I also don't. I think that after his mom dies, I think you lose a little bit of like what it looks like to love your family. So the way that he expresses that love, is kind of going through the motions and being somewhat present, but loving his family is also to deny the truth of who he is, because to accept that truth would be to potentially sacrifice that family. So it's like, I have a family and I love my family, and it's the thing you have to tell yourself to justify why you have not accepted the truth, because you love your family, and you have to remind yourself of that.
I thought it was really cool that moment is paired with him upgrading to the flat screen TV, which is sort of like, I think at least in the context of this movie, kind of like the soulless version of the technology,
There's no cathode ray glow, there's no radiation coming out at you.
Yeah. If there's no radiation, what's the point?
Well, especially
why are we even here?
When Owen's a teenager, and there's the great line of like asking, "What do you like?" and he says, "I think I just like TV shows." And it's like, well, now we're upgrading to the TV, where you're getting a newer model, a new journey in your life of getting the better TV. You've leveled up a bit.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Any other thoughts on I Saw the TV Glow?
I mean, we didn't talk about the whole the storyline within the show from the Pico Pick is kind of interesting too, because it's ultimately about them being buried alive, and again, a lot of like allegorical imagery there too. But I found that really compelling. Like, I love individual scenes of this movie. I love revisiting them. Like the moment Maddie comes back to him, they have that heart to heart in a crummy shopping mall, or crummy the grocery store, and then they have that conversation in the club where it's just like, you're doing Buffy, you're doing heartfelt conversation with an incredible band in the background. It feels so discordant with the way we even do these sorts of scenes now, but it was just like, it brought me right back to those moments of characters having very emotional conversations over, for some reason, kids are going to nightclub, teenagers are going to nightclubs, in Buffy. But hey, that was weird. I love so many individual scenes of this movie. Danielle Deadweiler as his mom, fantastic. I've loved her and everything. Yeah, I'm glad people are seeing this movie. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm curious if your audience of teens was restless at all, because you described the pacing as slow, and I'm curious, did people feel engaged with the movie? From your estimation?
As I mentioned, I didn't hear any talking, or anything disruptive. So
but it's nice that young people are going to movies at all.
Indeed.
And B,
teens could watch, like, we were teens. You guys were probably watching long, boring movies when you were teens. At least I did. I don't know. It's possible.
I would describe it as challenging. I would not describe this movie as boring, but
I also wouldn't describe it as boring. I wouldn't say boring. I just,
the stylistic choices didn't work for you, it sounds like, right?
That's right. Yeah. But I totally appreciate what everybody else is saying, and I admire the movie in a lot of ways. I think it's gorgeously directed, and some of the I mean, like Devindra brought it up, and it came back into my mind that the shot, just a single shot of him moving through the grocery store, and it's framed like 2/3 of the frame is the top of the grocery store with those enormous
food cutouts,
fake food cutouts. Just incredibly cool shot.
That was apparently just the real grocery store in the suburbs. This movie is also so much more about the malaise of the suburbs, which is something I'm understanding more and more now. So,
The big fear that I have with this movie, because people are having such like visceral reactions to it, and I've seen so many people say like, this movie, unlocked something in me that, I'll never be able to unfeel, kind of thing, or this is, their favorite movie of the year. And the only thing that like I'm slightly terrified of is that this movie is so much about not allowing the media that you consume to, be a replacement for your identity, for who you are. And I just really hope that the people who are feeling seen by this and who are, feeling something about this, analyze why they feel this way, instead of allowing this movie to then just become a replacement for their voice. Like, actually interrogate what it is that this movie is connecting with you, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of people end up like Owen, and that is like my deep nightmare for all of this. I think
that's why the ending hits so hard, right? It almost feels like a warning shot of like, hey, you love this movie, possible future.
Yes.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's
Maybe don't do that.
It's so scary. Like, it makes
Yeah.
me very upset because
God.
I just know too many people that, you know, I've lost people, and because ultimately, like, that's what I look at in that scene is because, you know, we have the show within the movie of the burying alive, and it's like, well, that's kind of what you have to do to embrace this world. You have to kill the life that you had before. It will never look the same way, and that is so scary. But if you don't do that, it will come for you. Like, it's going to come for you at some point. And there's this movie to me is more important than it is entertaining, like 100%. But I live for movies like this where I can sit here and talk about them and pick them apart and look at them from 100 different angles. Like, this is such a rich text for doing that. I definitely understand why this movie doesn't work for some people. I very much understand that, but I hate to call movies like important, because I think that word can get tossed around incorrectly. But I do think this movie is incredibly important, and I love that Jane is also such a no nonsense kind of person in discussing their art, and they're not trying to like be like, yeah, we're like the new like trans wave of cinema. They're very much like, we're still working within a horrible capitalistic society that hates trans people. So like, let's not go there, which I greatly respect. And if anything, like, adds more of why I love this movie, because now I know the intention behind the choices.
BJ Colangelo, so grateful for you joining us for today's review of I Saw the TV Glow. You want to let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Sure. You can find me writing over at /film. Got a lot of reviews over there. My podcast, This Ends at Prom, is on all of your, you know, wherever you get your podcasts. And occasionally I do some reviews over at Decoding Everything.
Woo!
Look at that.
Yes.
What? Never heard of it.
Yeah. Oh, and also, because I always forget to talk about this, my book came out. My wife and
Yay.
I wrote a book
Yay.
about sleepaway camp and its place as an unintentional queer and trans text, and that is available with Die Books.
Very cool. Well,
So
congrats
awesome.
on that, BJ.
Thank you.
I'm going to buy a copy of that book. So,
Thank you.
yes. All right. And at the end of the day, it is extremely impressive that Jane Schoenbrun made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.